Hello, everyone. It is Monday, which means we are back with Where Is Your Heart? Championing vulnerability as a core human strength. Hello, Royce.
Good morning. You remembered the voiceover. I'm so happy. I was like, oh shit, do I?
Weeks.
No, you're great. I was like, oh crap, we forgot to mention it ahead of time. So I was like trying to figure out, okay, I can unmute myself here. Anyway, blah blah blah. That was awesome. Thank you for.
Yes, thank you. I was like, I told myself that all day. Just remember the intro. Remember the intro. And I'm also going to remember right now, as you are watching Where's Your Heart, if you are on YouTube, please remember to click the subscribe button, like this video, share it with all your friends and family, and of course, hit the notification bell so you know when new videos are coming.
Yeah.
So you got that out of the way.
And thank you to all you, all our listeners who subscribed over the last week to our YouTube channel. We're almost there. We got to hit that. We got to hit that goal this week.
Yes. I want to be able to have an actual, real link to our YouTube page. Hi, Susan. Thank you for coming back.
Good to see you, my friend.
Yep. So, as we had decided last time, we were going to make sure that we did all of our little stuff quickly. So we're going to go with our gratitude for this week. Royce, you're going to go ahead and start this one.
Oh, I see. You know, we do this every week. At some point, I would figure out that I have to have a gratitude prepared, right?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, well, I mean, it's also nice to just kind of have to do a gut check. The COVID grind is real, y'all. Mm-hmm. But so I got some unwelcome news over the last couple of weeks with my physical therapy, but had a really good session today and actually got to start lifting using my shoulder to actually do strength training and got cleared for pull-ups and push-ups, which sounds really silly, but for me it's huge.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've gained 20 pounds now over the course of the last 6 months of not being able to work out and all that stuff. So felt really good to feel like I'm okay, getting back on track. I can at least do the things that I need to do. So I'm really grateful for that. Even though I'm probably also going to have imaging done. It sounds like it might be a tear.
Not
so
good. We'll just focus on the gratitude that, you get cleared.
That's where I'm going. Well, and also, I mean, minor tears, it's not like they're going to go in and do surgery or anything. PT is the solution. It just means, instead of 6 to 8 months, probably 12 to 16 months of PT and before I get the big thing here is I don't get to cut my hair until I enter a jiu-jitsu competition because God damn it. I was supposed to go to Pans last March and then they canceled the whole fucking thing because thank you, stupid diseases. Okay, so COVID. There you go. Yeah.
Well, I will go with my gratitude for just remembering that there are friends out there they just seem like they know the right moment to say something. And it's been a difficult month with the whole house situation, but it just seems like when I'm at my lowest, just somebody happens to write and say, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I'm thinking about you. I'm hoping everything's okay. And I'm here if you need me. So I'm grateful for having friends out there, people in my circle that, will check up on me even when I don't check myself. That's always important.
Yeah.
So I am grateful for that.
Hell yeah. And also, like, good on you for, like, cultivating friends around you, like keeping people around you who know how to do that,
Yeah. Well, it's like what we were talking about with our guests, some awesome guests today. It gets to a point as you get older, you start to realize that all the things that you thought were priority when you were younger, and that, if I get a friend, I got to keep that friend. And, that you start realizing, there's certain people you don't keep around you and those that you do, but you usually don't learn that until you get older. So, yeah.
Hell yeah.
That was pretty much one of my lessons.
Accurate.
Okay, so we're going to go to last week now.
There we go.
Yeah, I thought we would talk about which, strangely enough, because they have promotion for it, they are the vaccine. They actually came up with a plan to distribute, and it's happening. People are getting vaccinated, and they had something here in New Mexico at the pit to get people vaccinated there. I did find it interesting, though. I think a lot of people feel that since now it's out, like everything's back to normal. so they don't have to do the stuff they know they need to do still,
Oh my
because
God.
there's a process with the vaccine. And in fact, there's a large convention in I think it was Indiana, that is deciding, it brings out like 30,000 people, and they are already deciding that they're going to do it this year.
Gen Con?
Oh gosh, I can't remember. I think it might be.
Oh,
But I'm just kind of like, for a
I'm
place
so
that
excited and heartbroken all at the
yeah,
same time.
because I mean, I really like. I'm hoping that we'll get to do something with New Mexico Comic Expo, because we were pumped to do it last year and already started making plans, and then we had to shut it down. So I I want to. I want
Yeah.
things. I want
Yep.
events again. I want to start having events again. But I feel like this naivete of people that are like, oh, I got the vaccine, so everything's well, so let's go back to what we were doing. And
Yeah.
people are going to have to realize, like, no, that's not how it works. That's
No,
not how.
we all got to be wearing these fucking masks till we have 70%, what is it, 70 or 80%
Yeah.
of the population vaccinated before we have herd immunity. Like,
Hmm.
it's a thing.
And it's
We got,
2 doses. It's 2 doses. Like,
yeah.
most people are getting that first one, they're like, woohoo, and then they don't go back for the second one. So, you got to keep that in mind. I mean, I want these events. I really, really do. But we got to be smart on how we do it.
Yeah, we got to take care of business.
Exactly. Exactly.
We also got to say hi to Vincent over there. Dr. Gaddis.
That is.
Sorry, like, we're glad you're here, man. And we
Sorry,
also,
I'm late.
I love you. My brother.
Oh, she got a nice job, Susan. Nice
And
job.
and I'm curious, Susan, is that because you're a teacher, or like how did that happen? Because it's been one of the big sticking points is how do we
Hmm.
prioritize our support systems, and especially with some of the statistics that we're seeing around the 95% of the spread is coming from the age group of 20 to 50-year-olds. Like, so yeah. Oh, looks like Dr. Gaddis got his first shot today as well.
Oh
So
my goodness! I'm
yeah,
just I'm glad that
people
people
getting
are
this
getting
thing.
vaccinated. Although I will say, when you were talking about priorities, that, we got notification that APS is going to look to open back up the schools, and there's this conflict between, like, the
Yep.
board and the teachers, because a lot of parents are just like, get our kids back in school. And I'm wondering, like, because like I said, I didn't know about the vaccination that was happening at the pit. Is it? Is there a certain group of people that are getting it first? Like, have they had the kids get it? Are they on the list, or are they doing the elderly first, or that I didn't know?
New Mexico's using a bunch of different factors, but I'm not sure I understand it all. But yeah, so yeah, apparently Susan says they did
Oh, good.
prioritize
Okay, wait.
teachers,
Yep. Yes,
but
they prioritize. Yep, in Kentucky.
yeah,
In
but
Kentucky.
they only got the first shot and they're back to class today. Like, oh, fuck. And Dr. Gaddis, yeah, you're mentioning something interesting as a volunteer chaplain. That was my spouse Sarah, was high on the priority because she's a pastor, and so she's uh, first responder adjacent, I guess is how they kind of have phrased it.
Okay.
So it's an interesting construct. I'm really grateful because in our household she's the person most at risk.
Mm,
But it also, like, she's sitting there looking at some of her congregants who are 70 years old who haven't gotten them yet, who are very much at risk.
wow.
And so it's, these things are never going to be perfect, anything like that. But I think it's worth always reflecting on. And also, like, the mandate is there. Just fucking put on the masks. In fact, put two of them on, because the variants that we're seeing, some of them spread more easily. They don't require the
Mhm.
buildup in the nasal passages. So anyway, the viral load is the term they use.
God, that sounds horrible.
I know.
Viral load. So yes, everybody, keep wearing your mask. It's great that we have a vaccine, but we still have some waiting to do,
Yep.
and a process to do. So we are on to this week's topic, which I'm glad we are doing. I've been really excited
Oh
to see
yeah.
the activism happening in this country. People talking, having conversations about things that are uncomfortable. And because they're always uncomfortable, nobody ever wants to have the conversation. So nothing
Fuck
ever
is wrong with being uncomfortable? Like,
it's
has nobody ever worked out? Working out sucks. It is severely uncomfortable.
That
That's
is
the point of
precisely
it.
why when people make it a New Year's resolution, I mean, they realize it's like, oh wait, this is hard work now. I don't want to do this. This
Yeah.
hurts. It hurts. So I feel like there needs to be. I want to know what happens next. We did the protest.
Yeah.
We went out there. We held the signs. We made the speeches. Now is what we need to figure out is going to happen after all the bowstring, and getting people to understand there's a lot of hard work ahead. And
Yeah.
what are you going to do to be a part of that?
And my big, my big fear of electing the Biden-Harris ticket. White people going to go back to sleep now.
Exactly.
Just like,
They're
God
like, we got
damn
the
it.
right people. We don't have to do anything anymore. No.
And again, hats off to the work that they're doing. Like there's a lot of some of the things that are coming down from the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. There's a bunch of good work being done there. Good people being appointed of a variety of backgrounds and a variety of marginalized identities.
Uh-huh.
But if we stop, like our government stops working, that's I think the lesson of the last year is our government will only work for us when we are looking at them and saying, we need this from you. No, we need this from you now, motherfucker.
Uh-huh.
And if you don't fix it, we coming for that job. And I don't think that we as a country understand that, or maybe we just don't give a shit. I don't know. There's something wrong. We have to stay awake.
Exactly. Which is why we are having this topic, and
Yeah.
the 3 people we have on for this week. I'm excited to have them. So we're gonna do this differently because
Yeah, you're introducing everybody because I don't have bios in front of me.
yeah, we didn't get bios, so we're gonna bring them in one by one, and they're gonna tell you about themselves.
Oh.
Like at networking, we're gonna do it that way. So here we go. We're gonna first bring
Okay,
on.
but they got to do it in 5 words.
Ooh, see, that's what you get for not sending a bio.
Ah, there it is. I
All
love
right,
it.
here we go. So first one up, Mr. Jason Carter.
Hi, and that's not one of my 5 words. I got one.
All the stuff he's saying right now is not part of
Okay,
his fun.
so here's my 5-word intro. Black entertainment journalist, television guy.
Bam!
There he is. Welcome, Jason.
Pleasure to be here. 505 in the house.
Woo! Next up, Mr. Hakim Bellamy. Yeah.
Man, that's tough, Jason. It's tough to have to follow. So
I think Black's going to be in there. I'm just saying.
Black is going to be there. Let me get read with Black. Black, bureaucrat, artist, organizer, father.
Oh.
That's good. That's a good one.
All right, that is one hell of a word picture.
Was that 4?
That was 5. That was 5.
Okay, I didn't want to leave any words on the table. You know what I mean?
But you put
Hey.
artist and bureaucrat next to each other. My brain exploded. So I can't wait to hear.
Right, I did that instead of, I left out Gemini and did that instead. Boom, got you.
He stuck a 6th one in there.
And last but certainly not least, Ms. Rhonda Crowder. Hello, Rhonda.
Hello.
Glad to have you here. Okay, what are your
Thanks
5
for
words?
having me. So, journalist, Black, Gemini, activist, and author.
Is anyone a Libra besides me in here?
I'm an Aries. I don't think there's none in here.
Royce, when's your birthday?
Y'all, the white guy's a Cancer.
Oh, okay. And I'm logging off. Thank you so much for allowing me to come.
Out of the mouths of babes, and then that was real. The white man is Cancer.
Royce is not saying, just to be clear to all the listeners, Royce is not saying all white people are cancers. That is not what he said. That is not what he said.
Thank you.
Cancers are very nice people. My sister is a Cancer.
My worst enemy is a Cancer, so I was just thinking but Royce, I like you, and Royce, you have great hair and a good name, so you can stick around. You're good in our book. You're good in our neck of the woods.
The Royce.
Yes, no, Royce.
They insisted I change my name.
Black appropriation. Why don't we Royce?
See, this is my issue with it.
Torian said he could, so you know.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's actually the inverse of Royce to 5'9". You took the duh and put it in the front. Yeah, nice.
There it is.
Well played.
Love it.
Torian and Teresa kept calling me that, and eventually I was like, all right, fine.
That is now your name.
Well, Royce, how do you pronounce your last name?
TevisTownes.
Tevis what? Tevin Campbell what?
TevisTownes.
Can we talk? Just kidding. Okay, and the show goes on.
And it does. Okay,
It does.
so you all have been watching the news. We're kind of feeling like a nice release from craziness. I almost feel like the news is back to where it's supposed to be. So you've seen it all. We've witnessed the craziness that happened. Some of the protests, which led to people deciding that organization shouldn't be represented. I'm amazed because when Black Lives Matter came out, it was pretty clear to me why they were there. Their message was clear, and that changed. It's like everybody kept changing the narrative, and now it's mess soup. So, but it's nice to see that people were going out there and protesting. But what do you feel needs to happen now? We got our voices out there. What now?
I think, hi guys, I'm gonna chime in because I've been thinking about this a lot this week. Teresa, you say we got our voices out there, and we got our voices out there by galvanizing and mobilizing, and our voice was very loud. We entered so many different factions of Blackness: trans Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus Black Lives Matter, and when I bring those two things up, when I bring up the LGBTQ plus component of Blackness, is because we know it's no secret that there is still homophobia within the Black community, right? And people, at least in LA, where I was, felt like, whoa. Why are you entering that conversation into this? Well, they're Black as well.
Yes.
They're Black as well. So back to what you said about we got our voices out there. I do think we did that. But it's like when everything hits a fever pitch, we're hyper aware, we're hypersensitive, we're present in what's happening. But also there was a bit of trauma that came with that, right? Yeah. So there was a malaise that happened afterwards because you couldn't turn on the TV, you couldn't, especially being a person of color, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing, without a replay of George Floyd, the narrative of Breonna Taylor, and the myriad of other our Black brothers and sisters who have been murdered and killed. So I think now the conversation needs to be a little bit more nuanced and also needs to take place in places like your business where you work. Because a lot of people, myself included, felt like I've never been a victim of Black violence physically, but violence isn't always physical.
Exactly.
Violence can be microaggressions. Violence can be lack of support at your job. Violence could be a lack of interaction with your superiors. It's a myriad of different things. So I think the conversation now needs to be, okay, great. You posted your black box, Wells Fargo. You posted your black box, CBS. You did all these things. What are you doing behind closed doors when no one's looking and when it doesn't serve your best interest to be performative?
Exactly.
Right? Because it's a lot of the bad behavior, at least in my industry in entertainment, was all covert. It was never ever someone blatantly calling you an N-word, but it was like
in the green room. It's not on stage.
Or it's like, ooh, Hakim Bellamy, he sounds Black. Let's have Hakim. I don't know. Let's have him talk about slavery in this report because he's Black and he's the perfect person to do it. Not knowing that, hey, just because I'm the only Black person in the room doesn't mean I have to be the cheerleader or the poster child for traumatic porn, for Black trauma porn. Because a lot of people feel like, okay, we have these stories, we know what happened, even though they're trying to erase slavery from the history books. They're not even teaching it in schools anymore. So let's make sure that we get every Black person to speak on it, not really caring that, yes, this is traumatic for us too. This is a moment in time, a moment in history that we've never, besides COVID, that's very unprecedented for people of color, right? We've known that racism is there, but to have it in our faces as it was in 2020, we weren't equipped for that because we've never had to, let me speak for myself. I'm sorry. At least in my lifetime, growing up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, moving to LA, I had never seen racism like the racism I saw in 2020 and during the Trump administration. So to answer your question, I think what we do now is have more conversations behind the closed doors that were never happening before the uprising of 2020. That's just in the entertainment aspect of where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Interesting. Rhonda, you are actually a CPA. So what are you looking on the side of just being part of the Black community and having a conversation about wealth? I feel like that's one thing that was also spoken about right now is with COVID happening, a lot of businesses started, and there's been a lot of support towards Black business and creating our own wealth, because that was part of the problem, is that we didn't we didn't have that within the community. So what are you seeing as a conversation that needs to happen in that aspect?
And I guess maybe I've been seeing it for some time now, just from where I sit. I'm located in Cleveland, Ohio, and it's been a movement towards, Black entrepreneurship for quite some time right now, and it's been going pretty strong. But just really, in my opinion, I think that we as Black people, it's really time for us to learn how to work together, to learn how to come together as organizations. When you look at the strength of majority organizations, it's the result of mergers and acquisitions, and we don't normally do that. So we have to really start thinking about, like, how do we come together and work together as a whole and get the whole pie, and then divvy it up amongst ourselves, than getting pieces and crumbs of somebody else's pie.
Yeah. Oh, dang. So, Hakim, you're with the city. You see it. You get to see a whole different aspect that a lot of us don't. So, what are you feeling on this?
And the city, let's throw some context out there. A city where African Americans make up a single-digit portion of the population.
Yep.
Where we have a Democratic mayor, but he seems to me to be one of the whitest human beings I've ever met. And I mean, okay, maybe he's doing his work, but I don't know. I don't know him personally. But like, some of his stuff just feels a little tone deaf. So like, yeah, what's going on behind the scenes? How are we doing?
So how are we doing, right? And I'm a father of a 13-year-old young Black man. He's mixed, like many New Mexicans are, but that's not how police pull you over. They don't ask you like what your star sign is and what your racial makeup with your parents was. That's not how it works, and it hasn't worked that way in a long time. And I knew when I took this position, and I just shared it with a friend recently. And I know the mayor. I know his wife. I've worked with him in the past, and so when he asked me to work in this administration, I felt like it was important to do it now because of the span of time in which it will impact myself and my family, right? And so if things go the mayor's way and he's reelected, by the time he's done, my son will be 17. And I said, for a young, broad-chested Black man who looks a little older than he probably is, but is still a sweet young boy, it's important that if I can, for my personal situation, that your father have a relationship with the guy who's the police chief's boss. It's a good thing for us. That can't be bad for us, right? That can't be bad for us. But in a broader sense, to really speak to, what Jason and Rhonda were speaking to, and I agree with what both of them said, because what Jason has on me is that he actually grew up here. I grew up in South Jersey, outside of Philadelphia, where the number of Black folks is definitely in the double digits, right? Almost a majority sometimes it feels like. And having come out here, I have to say, how do we build power? Like, as not a power minority, and I hate the word minority, but that's what they call us, right? So we're not a power minority. We have to figure out how to build power, not just population wise, but political wise. And that's what Rhonda was talking about. Like, and I don't want to pick on organizations because I'm a member of these organizations and I grew up as a student of these organizations, just watch, we're in the grand patron saint stretch of season between MLK's birthday and the end of Black History Month, where all you do is watch documentaries about Blackness and about Black history. And so this is our time. And we checked up a new one, 2017 one on MLK, and they were talking about SNCC and the infighting, and FDLC and the infighting, and NAACP and the infighting. And to Rhonda's point, yeah, I know we all need unions, we all need membership organizations that we pay dues to, and we're a part of this church and not that church, and I'm an alpha and he's a Q, and it's like, well, imagine what would happen if you consolidated not just the spending power, but the political power of that. And to Jason's earlier point, and you talked about it, Rebus, you actually gave us the science to it. It's like, yeah, that was by design. There was a design, there was a decentralization of poor white. And it worked so well that it was also done on Blacks, and people like to say, y'all are each other's competition, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Because we're all trying to get up the same ladder, and we got to stomp on each other to do it.
The inverse is what you see in government. To speak to the failings of government, since I work there, is that you get these programs that are super siloed. So this program is just for Asian kids, and this program is just for Hispanic kids, and this program is just for Black kids. And that's like the inverse way of saying, we ain't gonna give none of y'all $1 million, but we'll give you all $5. Like, you know, and we don't need the same programming. What ails the Black community is not the same as what ails the brown and red community. We actually don't need one big program, one size fits all. We actually need each program to get the high dollar level of investment. And that's kind of, to me, the only way to go. And what this last summer has done is really put the heat under the seat of those who are making the decisions to do that.
So I'm really curious about this part of it. I'm reading a lot of Black feminism over the last year and a half. One of the documents that really stood out to me is the Columbia River Collective, their document in the late 70s, and their story of how they came about having done the marching with MLK and tried to work with Malcolm X and those folks, and feeling like they were constantly being, as Black women, shoved to the side, constantly being told, no, you got to wait, we got to win Black rights first, like constantly being told, I mean, now get to the back of this bus. And so they got together with a group of women of color, and that started happening. But then these folks were ostracized for their not gender identities, their orientations, and so they went through this whole process to finally come down to, we can't be welcome in these spaces until all of us are welcome in these spaces. And that document is the document that coined the term identity politics. So at the time, it was very important to have that you called it a silo, right? That notion of, when we're aligned like this, it's significant and important, and we're all on board with accepting this. But we kind of have come to a different place here, is what I'm hearing. Like, we've come to a place where we have to be able to recognize also what unites us, or what is it? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just say it's, you know, can I have my cake and eat it too, right? It's that you need a specificity of programming, but you need an overwhelming, right, collective will, whether it's political will or whether it's majority will, to say, hey, we're not just, it's not about equality, it's about equity, and that we are so far behind in some of these other spaces that we need to overinvest in those spaces to get them where they need to be. And I've often said to folks, I'd be lying if I say government, and I'm just speaking about city government because that's where I work, but state government, certainly federal government has underserved poor white people. Yes, they need a program too, but they've historically underserved us longer and for more. So until we even get back to zero, like that, it's hard to even have that conversation if we're going to be the children left behind. So, right? Like,
I agree with that, because even a poor white person have a much better chance than we do.
And the poor Black would say it. Yeah. That is true.
Yeah.
So when it does come to this conversation, and Royce and I have talked about this, how much responsibility comes from the Black community when it comes to having these discussions? I mean, now there's white people. I'm still surprised that when I have friends that are like, I didn't know that was happening. I'm like, really? You really? But I digress. So now they're coming up and asking questions. And I've actually had friends that have said, I'm not here to educate them. There's Google for that.
Right.
So how much responsibility do we take? Because I mean, for me, I feel like we need to be a part of the conversation. If they're there to want to learn, really learn, then why shouldn't we be there to be part of that education for them?
That education for them is a beautiful thing. Yes. I mean, I think it all depends. It's a case by case basis, right? Because that, you know, what you just said, Teresa, was the sentiment of a lot of people of color, and in addition to Black people, but Hispanics, other marginalized groups, about like, well, especially in a time where we have, and I have two of them, where you can say, Siri, Google racial inequality, Zuri or Alexa or Shaquifa, whoever you are, Google something, right? Speaking for myself, I am not opposed to having a conversation about equality and about blackness in my experience, because we're not a monolith, we're not homogenous. Blackness is a myriad of different things to mirror
Mhm.
different people of color, and that's another whole conversation about how some black people think that there's only one way to be black, but we'll say that for another week.
Yep.
But it just depends on the person. I do think that, you know, we can't, it's one of those things where you can't order the pizza and not want to pay for it, right? You have to be able to be like, okay, fine, here, at least for me, here's where we're at. You want to know something? Sure. If you're coming and if you're approaching me respectfully and willing to listen, because people often listen with the intent of speaking versus just instead of internalizing and saying,
Mhm.
Yeah,
right?
let me take it in. Let me
Exactly.
digest
And
it. Let me
there's a
try it on.
exactly, there's a defensiveness because well, especially last year, especially June and May of last year, a lot of white people were hyper defensive. A lot of Karens that were named Karen were hyper defensive because they felt that they were being attacked. They felt like they were being lumped in to a group of people or an identity that they really didn't contribute to, but they weren't realizing how they were contributing to it. And again, I go back to the place where I used to work. Very powerful entertainment outlet, one of the biggest in the world. They had the audacity to say when Nipsey Hussle died that it was a niche experience in pop culture. That was a niche experience for we covered that
Wow.
because it was niche, not knowing that Nipsey Hussle was had given and done so much more, and there were people who were talking about Nipsey Hussle before he even died, right?
Mhm.
So back to having that conversation. I'm willing to educate people as long as they approach me respectfully and have a willingness and an honest to God intention of listening and doing better. On Instagram and on social media, I saw more educational content from white people from middle America that were like, yo, let me help. That went to, I mean, stuff that I couldn't even find. They were creating slideshows. Like it was, and I had to applaud them for that. Sure, it may have taken the death of these people and for us to see it on national TV, but I couldn't be mad at them for having the wherewithal and making the effort and having the intention of wanting to learn. So your question is, when is it our responsibility? Depends on the person. For me, yeah, it is our responsibility to some degree.
Yeah. What do you
Hey,
think?
I kind of agree with that. I mean, I don't mind educating anyone, and I think that there's a lot of education that needs to be had on both ends.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So we need to educate them and we need to educate ourselves
Say it.
as well, because it's so much of our history and our culture that we don't know,
Right.
and that we need to discover. I think one of the largest problems within our community is just we don't know who we are. And until we begin to understand who we are on a micro level and on a macro level, the trajectory of who we are and where we come from, we're going to always struggle with the things that we struggle with internally as a people.
But
And
Rhonda, I'm sorry. I want to ask a question though, because you say who we are though, right? So it goes back to and if you could elaborate and elucidate on that, because a lot I know when I talk to other black people, our black brothers and sisters, a lot of them felt ostracized by the black community. I know, and growing up in New Mexico, and because for whatever reason I wasn't black enough. I was
oh,
called Carlton, I was called Sissy, I was called
mm,
all these things that have colored my view and my experience on what
Mhm.
blackness is. So you mentioned who we are. Explain that. What do you mean by who we are?
Well, a lot of us believe that our history begins with slavery, and it
Mhm.
don't. We have much longer, broader history that begins far beyond, our presence on these shores here in what we call North America. And then even on a micro level, there's so much. I mean, we've been stripped from our name, our
yeah.
families, the division of the stripping of our families during slavery. It's a lot of us that don't even know who our mothers and fathers are, or our grandmothers and our grandfathers. And that's where self identity is rooted. So if you don't, I mean, like, the question has been asked, how can we kill each other, right? Like,
Mhm.
how can we kill each other in cold blood? Well, if I don't know who my mother is or my father is, if they left me when I was a child for whatever reason, if they was murdered or went to jail or just abandoned me, I'm gonna feel like the people who were supposed to love me didn't. So of
Right.
course I'm gonna be cold hearted. How can I expect somebody else to love me when the people who were supposed to love me
Didn't.
didn't?
Right. Great
For
point.
whatever reason, right? And so that's a huge reality that we're dealing with within our community. If you look at foster care, right, 70% of the foster care population is African American children, and there's no coincidence that those numbers mirror the incarceration
Right.
numbers.
Yep.
And that's not coincidence, that's by design. And
Mhm.
so then when we talk about, okay, how many of us can trace our family back, to a village in Africa or wherever we may come from? We can't. And so there's a sense of identity that is lost, and a lot of that may never be restored. But we got to really begin to just begin to teach us, our children, black children, about who we are. I grew up in the city of Cleveland, which is predominantly black. I grew up
Mm.
in the inner city. I didn't know, okay, you talk about, people called you Carlton and that sort of thing. Well, I grew up on the other side of that, where I didn't know black wealthy people or black professional people until I got to be like 30 years old working in a black newspaper. I didn't
Yeah.
know black judges, or because I didn't deal, in the criminal justice system. So I didn't have those encounters. I mean, but there is so many success stories. We've made so many contributions to this society that a lot of us just don't know about, and even the ones that we do know about, we still learning. So I mean, it's just so much that needs to be learned on both ends. There's a lot of healing that needs to be done. We have been in a very traumatic state for a long time. If you consider, we've been we were enslaved longer than we've been out of slavery.
Right.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of healing that has to occur as a result of that.
And not only that, but like we're still not back to baseline.
Right.
Like, let's be real clear. It's not just about slavery. Jim Crow went on for a long time.
Absolutely.
One drop
Absolutely.
laws for a long time. So when we talk about this, we haven't even begun to hit the reset switch. People talk about like how long it takes to make a new habit, right?
Yep.
I'm a coach. I do a lot of that work with people. It's all bullshit. Like if we want to get over the trauma of a bad marriage, if I was in that marriage for 10 years, it's going to take me probably at least 5 years to begin not waking up in that state of mind every day.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Now let's relate that to what we're talking about here. 450 years of oppression, of systemic, policy-driven oppression. So yeah, we're not even beginning to get out of the woods. This will not be
Absolutely.
done in our lifetime.
Yeah. But it won't be done in our lifetime. And, Rhonda, I think you make a great point about getting back to basics. I think that's essentially what you're talking about. For myself, I think that it also starts within our community about healing from the inside out as well, too,
Yeah.
right? Because, people may say reparations. You remember how in 2018, 2019, it was about reparations and all these things, which is great. Like, you go to a bar, they pay for your drink and give you like a reparations Monday, which I thought was like kind of like a slap in the face. And so I was like, that doesn't even sound right. Like I could pay for my own drink. Thank you very much.
I don't want no drink for reparation.
Right. It was in Oregon. It was in Portland, one of the widest cities in America. But I do think that the conversations of healing needs to start from inside the Black community out, because if you talk, Yanla does a lot of videos and a lot of Fix Your Lives with Black men that are hurting from experiences of other Black men, and and it's sad because here community is such a big thing for people of color, and like again,
Yeah.
growing up in New Mexico, Teresa and Royce, you guys can speak to this. If I'm having dinner and you guys come over, you're having dinner, and like you just happen to stop by, you're having dinner, you come on in, like that's how we're raised in New Mexico, right?
Exactly.
And that's how, and I think that's also how the Black community is though too. So for me, just in my experience, I think that the healing needs to start from the inside out, because there's a lot of animosity between I don't want to say different factions of blackness, but you have like Rhonda, I'm sure like colorism, right? You have people who probably looked at you and thought, oh, you light skin. You think you somebody because you light skin, right? And they made you, or all those different experiences people of color have. And I think that's a conversation that is not being talked about right now, because we're saying, okay, and it all needs to be talked about. But what I have seen is it's now black people against white people.
Yep.
Very black and white. It's now black people against white people right now because of what 2020 has shown us. That's very real. But it's also about, okay, well, I need my community to be there for me too. It's like the Avengers, right? We're all assembling to fight Thanos, right? We're calling out the Guardians of the Galaxy, the X-Men. We're all fighting for the greater good. But if within the Avengers we're all screwed up, how can we fight Thanos when we're too busy fighting each other?
So it was kind of like what Hakim brought up earlier about his son, and my son's mixed race. It's like that's another conversation. I really was at a point that I didn't realize that my son was going to have to almost have an identity crisis with what was going on right now, because he's half black and half white, but he's not white enough for the white community. He's not black enough for the black community. And so that's another conversation, another layer that's going to have to be discussed, because it seems like, just like we were talking about gay communities and everybody has like their little feuds, there's the same thing in the black community. I got looked down upon because I don't attend church. I'm not part of a church. But the minute there's some people that find that out, they're like, why? What's wrong with you? Why aren't you? Why aren't you? And I'm just like, I'm a spiritual person. I'm not a religious one. So there's that level. There's all these different levels that are going to need to be covered as well. It's just so many layers to this topic. So I do wonder, like, how long do we keep the whole black against white thing? Because I know that started this conversation, and there's a lot of people in the white community that have taken on the challenge to make a change. But how long do we have it that it's like, okay, let's just focus on them? They need to fix it, be educated. How long do we focus on that?
Well, I want to have a swing at your. Oh, sorry, Royce.
Just Sonsidis is throwing out some comments too that I think are germane to this whole thing. Sonsidis, yes, I agree with.
Yep. Hold on. Yep.
Like
yes, I agree.
Yeah.
That it is case by case.
Yep. And her next comment too, that one-to-one conversation, both she and Dr. Gaddis mentioned, that it's how we have these conversations that matters.
Right.
Sure.
Hakim, what were you gonna say?
Yeah.
No, oh man, I was gonna say so many things, and they're all running away from me. I think I'll start with how Teresa ended. I will say, like, and I've had to have, my partner, my fiance now is not African American, right? So that's where the danger I was talking about earlier, like I'm a fan of BIPOC and people of color, but I'm like, all people of color aren't the same. And what Jason's talking about is even all black people ain't the same. Yes, so we have, like, the nuances are critically important, but how do we come together when we're trying to tackle something as big as institutional violence against bodies of color, right? Like, and so and not lose sight of the nuances. And so when I've said to my son, and he's old enough now, where I've been like, I can't teach you a lot about being a mixed child in America, because I was not that. I have two very black parents, and I grew up in a very black experience. And I feel like that was Jason's question to Rhonda, and I appreciate her articulation of it. Was like, I'm not talking about acting black, because everybody has a different definition of what that is, right? I'm talking about our shared understanding of not just who we are, but the things that have inhibited us knowing who we are. So we can actually point to, like, that adoption statistic Rhonda put out there, like that. If we can explain to us and each other and our young people that's not your fault, you did not create that. That is generations of systemic, economic, judicial, like that was put in place to make sure that there was always a population of folks that were going to feed a system or whatever its nefarious needs are. Then just understanding that would help us not blame ourselves so much, right? And what I heard Jason saying is, like, hurt people hurt people. Yeah, that's what hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. And if we are hurt and we're not recovering from those kind of intergenerational wounds that Rhonda was talking about, then I'm not the best dad all of a sudden. I'm not the best partner all of a sudden. I'm like lots of things. I'm not the best because I still have a little bit more work to do, right? And I feel like that's what when you say like, how does the community not even educate each other, because we can get all philosophized, but just care for each other, like care for each other in a different way. Because I feel like your point is taken. It has become black versus white, which is lost on New Mexico, which is a gradient of darkness. And not just black and white, not just the polar ends of darkness.
Yes.
And people try to figure out where they fit into that and don't fit into that. And frankly, New Mexico sometimes feeling like it's not part of the conversation. Be like, that's not our fight, but it absolutely is your fight.
Exactly.
It absolutely is your fight, right? But also like that the canary in the coal mine is the black community still. Other people have struggled. Other people have suffered under the empire that is American empire. But we've been the ones that have not been able to flip that house, right? And really turn it into a very different looking future. At least that's what the trends say.
I remember hearing once that you cannot be a racist if you don't have the power to oppress. And so I think as Black people, we may have prejudice and bias, right? But we don't have the ability to be racist. And so I think that in order to correct this, I think that white America have to take responsibility for what happened between 1619 and 1865. And, stop trying to even with what happened on January, what day was that?
6th.
A day that will live in infamy.
They're trying to put that under the rug. And that just happened. They're trying to sweep that under the rug. Oh, let's forget about it. Let's just say, no, we cannot do that.
Let's come together and heal.
Right. We have to acknowledge what happened. Okay. And I think that there has to be a shared understanding of, okay, we're going to acknowledge and we're going to forgive. Because if we don't do that, we will always continue to be in this, black, white divide, battle, what have you. And it's high time that if America want to live up to its fullest potential, right, to the ideals that was written in our Constitution so many years ago, the playing field is going to have to be level for everyone. Period. Like what we're dealing with now economically, with the healthcare system, everything that we're dealing with now here in America is the classic phrase, chickens coming home to roost, because you have oppressed a large body of people for so long, right? Like, so if these people are not, participating, are not contributing, you cannot get the fullness of what America really is. So, I think I heard another statistic that said, in terms of the Black community, we have our first generation of Black men who have never worked a job a day in their life. And when I heard that, I'm like, yeah, I know. So I know too many of them, because they've been in prison. They've been in prison. They done did 2-3, terms in prison. And now they 40 some years old and they done been in prison the majority of their life. Where you expect them to go work at? You want them to go work at Popeyes and McDonald's? That's not gonna happen. That ain't enough money for them to take care of the kids that they made going in and out of prison. That's not gonna happen. So then, okay, so how do we contribute to the tax base? If you don't give everybody an opportunity, if only 3% of the population control the majority of the wealth, we might as well live in a communist society.
Yeah,
good point.
That's why we like all those shows that they have on Netflix about monarchies. We're into that kind of feudal state. I really do. I think we romanticize it because our ancestors, not ours, the founding fathers ran away from that and then created that. right? Like,
But hey, but look, Shonda Rhimes is killing it with Bridgerton. There's a lot of rich black people in that one. That was Shonda Rhimes. Can we give a shout out to Shonda Rhimes real quick? She had the wherewithal to be like, listen, I'm gonna have an interracial relationship. I'm gonna have interracial sex. Like, I'm gonna make it all yummy and delicious, and that's why she's successful. That's why Bridgerton is the shit.
But I think that's another thing. It's like people got tired of like not seeing themselves on television, in movies, and just somebody else telling the story.
Right.
And it's just realizing like, oh wait, I'm black. Shouldn't I be telling the story? And then I think that needs to happen a lot more.
That goes back to your point, Teresa, and Jason said it. Like, I am not opposed to teaching, because there is an old saying that if you want it done right, you do it yourself. That's an old saying, right? And so if do I want someone else to interpret my experience, right? Like, and so, but there is the fatigue, right? Of, and I also heard Jason say this, that like we as artists there's total pain porn. There is flagellation in putting especially as a writer and a poet, like putting yourself on stage. And when that becomes the only thing you can profit off of, it becomes a toxic relationship with yourself, right? When now you just know that my suffering is the only thing I can sell, right? Like, and we're more diverse. We have more stories than that. Like that's why hashtag Black Joy caught on 3 or 4 years ago, right? Like, because it was like, oh, like what if we just 30 minutes of us smiling and being happy? Like, that's radical. That's radical, because we're not supposed to be.
And let's talk about the system that says if you don't have something to sell, you're not worthy. Like, let's also address that shit too, because like that notion right there, that I'm selling my pain, my trauma, because I have to sell, like that commandment, thou shalt sell something, is
Well, think about, that's Royce. That's a good question, because I mean,
that's a very good question.
I'm approaching this from my experience as of late, because in 2020, even now that we're into 2021, I look back over the last year and think I still am my mind's blown over so many things that have happened to me professionally that were littered with racism and were littered with microaggressions, right? So we've had time we're still processing. But you mentioned selling your wares, right? I was hired, in Hollywood, they check a lot of boxes. We're going to get this is not, because it looks great. We have to make sure that we are inclusive, and diversity and representation are the ideals, but inclusion is the exercise of those, is the actionable item of those ideals, right? So you work in places where they're like, okay, we're going to get a black person behind our door to make sure we have one there. And then we get them there, it's like, okay, well, you don't really matter. Or, case in point, Jussie Smollett. That was in 2019. Jussie Smollett was a huge conversation in the black community, right? And so they look to you to be the person who delivers that story, who can talk about that experience. Oh, he's black and gay, you're perfect. Not knowing, as Hakim said, that it's toxic when you always have to constantly relive that type of trauma. Even though it didn't happen to you, being adjacent to it in some capacity is terrible. And then when you have your job, or you have your profession, or you have to return to an environment that expects that from you over and over again. And if you don't deliver, then they enter another section of marginalization, another section of racism. Well, you're black. That's what we have you here for. Like, we can't have, you don't want to do the black story, then don't ask me to do a black story ever again. Then, going forward, you're good on the black stories. But it's like, why does it have to be all or nothing, right? So it's this crazy thing. But I want to also, Rhonda, you made a great point about we have to just decide to stop being bitter and stewing in the same rhetoric over and over again about, oh, well, I'm mad at the white person because the white person did this. My husband's white. I have 2 white stepdaughters, right? So people always come at me like, well, how can you be upset when your husband's white? Well, my husband gets it. And there are great people who, and of course, and this is not, I'm preaching to the choir, but to those that are listening, there are people who are non-POC that completely get it, that sometimes get it more than black people that are like, that have it figured out, So I think that it just comes back to both parties being willing to say, okay, we both done fucked up.
Yes.
Where do we go from here, right? How do we move forward? Hi, I'm Jason. Nice to meet you. You're Royce Tevin Campbell. Royce Tevin Campbell. Pleasure to meet you. Let's go to John's and have some pizza. Tell me about yourself. Oh, you're a therapist? You know, I need some therapy. As a matter of fact, I'm depressed. I'm on 3 SSRIs. I don't sleep. You know, like stuff like that. That's what needs to happen.
Definitely, Jason. I totally agree with that. I mean, you know, we have what we call good white folk, right? Like
good white folk.
As if there was not for good white folk, we would still be picking cotton and out in the field somewhere. I mean, you know, it was good white folk that was abolitionists that, you know, helped bring slavery to an end. It was good white folk that helped, you know, us move through the civil rights you know, movement. You know, I pretty much grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. I've been in predominantly Black, you know, situations the majority of my life. I went to a predominantly white school, right? And interestingly, I went to a very mixed church that was an abolitionist church, you know, back in slavery days. I mean, they had the tunnels in the basement of the church. So I have encountered good white people all of my life, you know, and I mean, and it's just like, you know, there's good Muslims, there's bad Muslims, there's good Christians,
Right.
there's good Black people, there's bad Black people, but the stereotypes of Black people, you know, is always generally bad. Like you said, we are not a monolith. I remember going to Germany on a group study exchange. I was in Germany for 30 days. And I was having a conversation with an 18-year-old German kid. And I said, you know, what do you think of, when you think of Black Americans, you know, what come to mind? And he said, athlete, drug dealer, or entertainer.
Rapper.
That was it. He didn't see other images of Black people, and unfortunately a lot of us don't either. Like, I remember when I first saw the Cosby Show, I thought that was, you know, it was unicorns. Like, I ain't know Black people that live like that. And then I started working at a Black newspaper, and you know, my colleague sitting at the desk next to me, he like, oh, I that was normal. Because he grew up in a house with his father was a doctor, his mother, both of his parents were doctors, right? So I mean, even as Black people, depending on where we sit and, you know, in our lens, we buy into the same stereotypes that has been projected. And that's the way we see ourselves. We can't see us being, you know, rising above our circumstances or whatever it may be. And so I remember not that long ago, you know, after the George Floyd situation, white woman on one of the media outlets asked the question, how can we end racism? And I'm like, duh, the media is what perpetuated it.
Right.
Going way back, you know, because they only put out certain images of us. They've controlled certain images of us. Jason, you're a journalist, you know, even to this day, Blacks is still less than 10% in newsrooms across this country.
100%.
We're still not in decision-making roles. We're not determining what's news, what's going in front of the screen. You know, I'm a member of the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. We have members in our group that's been for 50 years on TV, straight 50 years, and still putting up a camera on the street, telling a report as a story as a reporter. That is ridiculous.
And they say it's because it's local news. We don't have the budgets because it's local news. Yeah, I feel that.
They should be news direct. They should easily be news directors or executives. So I mean,
or an anchor in a market like Albuquerque. Like, wow, they'll never have a Black anchor because they will always say there's only 9% of y'all, and it's like all the more reason to have a Black anchor behind that.
Well, they did. So they had Tia Bland Douglas. Remember Tia
They
Bland
did
Douglas?
have Tia Bland. I remember Tia. I know
Right.
Tia. Yeah.
But she was relegated to weekends. She wasn't.
Right.
She was
Right.
only on the weekends in the morning and wasn't. And then you have Van Tate, who has been working in Albuquerque for 20 some years. But what does Van Tate do? What that perpetuates the stereotype?
Sports.
And we love Van. We love Van. We love Van. But it's very that. Rhonda, you make a point about the media, and it just pumped in my mind. O.J. Simpson, cover of Time magazine, 1995. The mugshot, how Time darkened his complexion to perpetuate the image that black men are savage, that black men are murderers, that black men are aggressive, that black. I mean, it's been talked about for forever. And also and I also brought this up on the Young Turks. I work for the Young Turks, and here in Miami, they had an ad that featured a person of color. No, it was for Georgia. Sorry, Georgia, where the ad ran on one outlet. He was regular skin tone. His opponent had that ad darkened to show that he is.
It was our newest. It was one of our newest senators, Raphael Warnock, that they did that.
Right.
To, yeah.
So Rhonda, you hit the nail on the head when it comes to the media, because that it's exactly that, and that's been something that but this progressive media was trying to get a handle on. I will say this though, growing up in Albuquerque, I think that, and Teresa, you probably can identify with this as well, that it was a feather in our hat because, one, I didn't experience any racism in my life until I left New Mexico. I was never called the N-word. I was never ever treated differently, or maybe I just wasn't aware of it. It wasn't until I went to move to Los Angeles I started experiencing where I saw how blackness was and how I saw how things worked. And Rhonda, also to your point, working at CBS, which is always in trouble for racism. As a matter of fact, they're in the news again for racism right now. Which did you see Don Champion's? Go look up Don Champion on Facebook. He was someone who was targeted by the two people that are suspended, that are on administrative leave from CBS for racism and discrimination against LGBTQ plus. But these newsrooms are just like that. They will say, well, there's not a market for that. There's not an audience for black stories and if it's entertainment, unless it's Beyonce, Kanye, or Cardi B. That's all we care about talking about. They could care less about, I don't know, anything else that's not trending, right? Because they feel like, well, who's going to watch this? No one really cares about a black story that's not hyper celebrity.
Absolutely.
And that was, when
it's not related to them in any way. If like anybody can't connect to that, it's like it's not part of that learning of, we all are like the same people. Yes, we may be different colors, but we probably may have experienced the same things. I find that interesting that. Oh, it's just frustrating. It's like when I went to go see Black Panther for the first time and not realizing how badly we needed a black superhero.
Oh my God.
So I'm just like having that moment. And and Jason, I was with you in the sense that I felt like I didn't have any racial moments here living in Albuquerque, but it wasn't until I was older the nuances of what that I did. It's just I didn't realize that
it wasn't overt. It wasn't overt racism, right? It was like, we speak of microaggressions and we speak of like, so I don't know if you guys have read Mariah Carey's memoir, which by the way is incredible, The Meaning of Mariah Carey. And the reason why it's so good is because it's not about her and her music and her being a diva. It's about her surviving racism and surviving physical abuse. It's an incredible freaking book. But she spoke about being in, I think, the first grade. She drew a picture of her family and she drew her dad with a brown crayon, and her white teacher laughed and was like, haha, why would you do that? And then made a mockery of her drawing her dad with this crayon because Mariah Carey's dad was black. So and to your point, Teresa, back in Los Lunas, New Mexico, or Belen, or Albuquerque High or Cibola, you did have those teachers that would make comments about certain things like, oh, well, your hair's really nappy today. But you didn't know better, so now that
you're older, you realize.
Like, thank you for re-traumatizing me. I'm leaving.
And now that I have there's times, and I had some very interesting people that I've worked with, but there was an individual that wanted to work with my company, and she deals with the dance community, and there was one particular black dancer that she knew, and she's like, "Oh, I know this. She's a wonderful dancer. Do you know her?" And I'm just like, not every Black person in Albuquerque knows it. Like, we ain't going out on Sundays for a barbecue and teaming up and be like, "What happened with you this week?" It doesn't. That's not what happens here. And so I find interesting the little things that happen with some folks here that now knowing, like, oh no, that don't see that. Like,
Teresa, would you call that the definition of shade? Would you refer to that as? But I will say this: like, I feel like Jason and Rhonda brought it up, and I way further back than them. They are actual current professional journalists, but I used to work at a media literacy project, and we used to do media literacy education deconstructions all the time on pop culture, because that's what the young people were into. And you're absolutely right that there is a hierarchy of credible sources in any newsroom that certain people can speak about this with authority. And we can't speak about anything with authority that's not entertainment or sports. And so that's the insidious nature of, like, how you do and don't get promotion in the newsroom. And if we can't talk about other, polite dinner conversation like politics and other things like that, then if we never get to do it, no one's ever going to see us as people who can do it, right? Including ourselves, right?
But that's why you have like associations like the National Association of Black Journalists that are holding people accountable and that are making sure that there's those opportunities. And we talk about seats at the table, right? But now we're saying this, we're like, no. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go to IKEA, buy every table, build all the seats, and have our own tables, right? We're not waiting for someone to give it to us. And I do think that going forward, especially with everything that was unearthed with people coming forward, people were foregoing their NDAs to call the companies they work for over the last year, because it was just like, it was that triggering, especially in the news industry, of what happens in these newsrooms, the abuse, the lack of support, the lack of equal pay for Black women, for Black men, the opportunities that are there. There is no reason why, as you said, Rhonda, someone who has been on the air in a major market like a Cleveland, like a Philly, like a Miami, and we know in these cities, the newspaper, the radio, church, and local news are 10 poles that hold it up, right? That those are things that make that just you don't mess with. There's no reason why those people should not be exalted to higher degrees and be treated differently after being there well over a decade. It's just ridiculous. But I think that's changing now. And I think
decades.
But if you think about working in news though, like a place like Albuquerque, Teresa, how many years did we see Diana Salceda or who, like, there was just the same news people on air for year after year after year. Then when someone comes in, they're there for 5 years. You think, wow, they've been here a long time. 10 years in one market's a long time in news, believe it or not. It's a long time. But I think that people are now, they're saying, okay, fine. You see something, say something. And people have been put on notice. And so now it's become this, like, I'm going to take care of myself, and I've already been through the ringer. I've already lost so much. I have nothing else to lose. So you're going to do me dirty. I'm going to make sure you're going to pay for it. I may lose my career, but you're not going to get away with it this time.
Well, it was like what you talked about earlier when you mentioned, like, companies need to take a good look at, it's like, don't put out the message. Don't put up the black box. Don't do any of that until you take a look at your home.
Got
like,
February video.
Thank you. Yes.
That's the worst. Hulu celebrates Black cinema. Well, I was watching. Okay, Boys in the Hood's been out for 30 years. Where is it on Hulu? Like, stop it.
And that's when you see all that stuff come up. I mean, my whole thing. I have a friend. I won't mention the company. I really feel like I should, but she did sign an NDA, and this was really upsetting to me. Was she was working for the company for over 10 years, and they started going through the process of kind of clearing out their older, so they could bring in new. And before they can get their severance check, they were asked to sign,
of course,
form that stated that, hey, you can't go out and tell anybody that, like, you've seen anything racist here, or just to get your severance check. And I was just like, are you kidding me? She said, yeah. and she's waiting for the time that she's just going to be like, screw it, I'm just going to tell everybody what happened, because that same company was out there with all the other companies talking about we're all about diversity.
You mean like the NFL last night, but they didn't show Colin Kaepernick? That part.
Oh my goodness! And you got like two like national. This weekend was there, so it's all right. Don't get me started on the NFL. Like why I really just need that moment that these companies aren't seeing. Just like I did a video talking about that after getting in a conversation with a friend, that if you are going to promote Black History Month only to promote it to show how supportive you are, but you're not looking at how supportive you are the other 300 and some odd days a year, if you're not doing that, don't support Black History Month.
Well, which was part of your earlier question, right? So you talked about what makes this more sustainable, and I was vibing off of the comments of Rhonda and Jason, because I was in the gap. I was also like, I kind of pulled back in March and May. People were like, "Yo, come on my podcast." It's still a pandemic. Talk about. And I was like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there with, like, I've been screaming bloody murder in my art and poetry for the past 10 years about Black people, and no one listened. And now you want me on your podcast, so. That's cool. I'm not going to be like a social media hit for you, and I'm not interested. But here's what you can do. There are a couple of Black businesses in town that would love your takeout order.
Yeah.
If you actually care, and it's not just about a couple of likes for the moment, and this is my anti-racism reading list, and like there's actually muscles you can build, habits you can create that will actually keep us with roofs and food in our mouths and clothes on our back. And I think that's worth as much as that retweet. I do.
Or rehire.
Right.
I'll do one better. Or rehire the Black talent that you let go. Like, I know we want to wrap up, but Teresa, to your point.
Well, honestly, at this point, I'm like, we're just gonna skip like the after party. We're gonna extend it, because honestly, I was like, I don't know where to cut this off, so we're just gonna keep going. So do your thing.
We're talking about NDAs, and I worked for a very powerful news corporation, and during my time there was zero support for me and my Black co-host. And I would, Black History Month, they said, hey, let's do Black content. They said, sure. I pitched a whole Black vertical for this platform. And they said, we need to get a higher ranking executive to sign off on this. But the week before, they had no problem signing off on a Latinx vertical, because Latinx was trending in 2020. Latinx was the hotness in 2019, right? It's as it should be. Rightfully so, but also there's an audience for everything, right? So of course, NDAs I was let go, and nothing chapped my hide and burned me more and tore me down than seeing in last May this company say, we stand with Breonna Taylor. We're silencing for a day. This and that. Seeing the white talent on their social media go and pictures of them crying and all this stuff, and I'm thinking, like, where such bullshit? Where was that love and that awareness and that concern when in the common denominator, the lowest ranking foundation of how you could support in creative meetings in the day-to-day? Where was that? But now, because it's the trendy thing to do, you want to say Black Lives Matter, you want to post about, you want to put on your social media, you're marching at I was at the march, I was doing all this and that. It's like, I would rather you be like, you know what, I don't give a shit, I never cared about Black people, this not in my own backyard. I can accept that truth versus a performative action, because it's even more disrespectful. It's now you're profiting again off of the trauma of people of color, also off of my hard work, because you still have a job at a place I helped build, and you saw me be removed publicly. But yeah, now Black Lives Matter. Well, why didn't I matter on the day that they were packing up my shit and kicking me out? And it's not a woe is me situation, but I think it leans on
the hypocrisy of coming out and saying that you support something when you really don't.
And the number of times we've heard that story. Let's be clear.
Exactly.
Like, even me as a white guy, I've heard this over and over and over and over and over.
It's
as they say, we went from property to intellectual property. I mean, as they say.
Fuck.
It's crazy. And NDAs, people are normally with the NDA. Teresa, to what you're saying, that's the standard procedure. A company's always going to protect themselves. They're going to make sure that you're not going to sue them and come after them for the truth. You saw Bombshell. Gretchen Wilson. Gretchen Wilson was like, "I'm not going to. No, I didn't sign an NDA because I want to sue your ass for the dirt you did." Right. So when these companies hit these low level, or these naive employees, first of all, they're traumatized because they're being let go. 1, 2, they don't know the law, they don't know their rights, and 3, they know that they need to have some kind of money to keep it moving because the money that they're going to have is about to dry up. So of course they're going to sign that NDA because the company holds the power. What is the power? At the end of the day, dollars and cents.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. It makes me think back to right after Barack Obama was elected, Congress issued an apology for slavery. But it clearly said that this is not a case for reparations.
We're sorry, but you can't do
we
it.
talk about, where do we go from here? I mean, we definitely need reparations. I am all for reparations. We need to right that wrong. But then also, as Black people, we have to be really conscious about where we're spending our time, our energy, our resources, our money.
Yep.
Right? We have to get back to, I think it was said earlier, our voice and narrative. We have to control our stories. We have to get back to owning our own media. We have to get back to having our own strong communities. I mean, and we've had our own communities. You talk about Tulsa, there was hundreds of Tulsas, right?
Yeah.
And every time we build up a community like that, they come and bomb
it down. Yep.
Yeah.
But I think that we're in
and literally bomb. Let's be clear.
Literally bombing.
You're not being figurative
Literally.
here. Like
Right.
bombs were dropped on American soil by American airplanes bombing. Philadelphia is the one that comes to my mind.
The black mayor of Philadelphia that bombed move. Yeah, that whole thing.
So
Sorry.
I've been reading Dr. King's last book. It is actually titled "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" And this book is mind blowing. I believe this is the reason why he was assassinated because he lays out the blueprint for what Black people need to do. And there's 2 things he talked about that we have to achieve in order to achieve power. And that's economics and political power. Without the 2, you don't have any power. And that is what they have tried to keep us from for so long. Yeah. And so as Black people, we have to value education more. We have to pursue it. We have to pursue entrepreneurship. We have to make sacrifices, and we have to build back up our own communities. And until we get back to that place, we're going to always be at the mercy of a majority race. They're going to always have a foot on our neck, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
So I gotta put up the side now. We gotta wrap it up.
You put the wrap it up box on us.
That's cool. You can't avoid this one.
So pretty much I'm gonna ask you guys to share with our viewers where they can find you, what you're doing, and also just finish up with what you want either the Black community or the country overall, what you want them to focus on next, what you feel they need to focus on next. I'll go ahead and start with Rhonda because she was the last one up, so I'll make her the first one up.
So I could be found on all social media, Rhonda Crowder, Rhonda_Crowder, or some variation of Rhonda Crowder. Or you can go to my website, www.rhondacrowderllc.com. And I just really want to see. I want to see a national movement towards healing. Where we can really truly all races come together and look at, okay, what do we need to do to make America the country that we all dream of and aspire for it to be.
Right. How about you, Hakim?
Yeah, I'm gonna totally piggyback off of Ron and say that if we're gonna have that movement on healing, do the Octavia Butler, put the artists out front, let the artists do what we do well, which is envision futures, unlived and unseen, and lean into radical imagination, right? You can find me at Hakim B. The last two letters of my last name are BE. Bellamy is the long term form. Hakim B at Twitter and at Instagram, and somewhere on Facebook. And I think that I would also offer, speaking of like reparations, I just want to put this out there because we kind of ended with that topic. It is not unfounded to say to our law enforcement, first responders, or our military folks to say, hey, we're going to give you a break on the house, or we're going to give you a good deal on your education. And we do that for people who have sacrificed a lot for our country, and Black people have sacrificed a lot for this country too.
Absolutely.
All right, Jason, you up?
I on the heels of what those two incredible humans just said, I couldn't agree more. I don't have anything to add. I think for myself, I would love for more kinder environments for people to thrive in and feel comfortable in, because when you feel comfortable and you feel like you are being heard, seen, and valued, that was the word that was running through my mind all night, valued, you're going to rise to occasions and give more and be more effective in ways that you've never thought you could be, because you feel like there's a purpose and there's a worth there. I think a lot of people of color feel unworthy because they're made to feel unworthy. They're made to feel you could have a Rhonda Crowder LLC and be accomplished, and have someone not even see that about you because of how you look, right? Or Hakim Bellamy, because you are this beautiful Black man, they don't even give you the opportunity to speak on what you know to be true and what you are educated on. So I would love for a kinder, more inclusive and inviting circumstance and environment across all walks of life in all ways, shapes, or form. That's what I would like to see. And I know it's kind of like altruistic and very Oprah Super Show Sunday, but hey, I am who I am. You can find me on social media on Instagram at Jason Carter Official. That's where I hang out. That's where I do my thing.
Jason, Hakim, and Rhonda, thank you so much for being on here this week. I'm glad I knew you'd be good. I knew you'd be good at this topic. So thank you for coming out and
for having us.
Yep, and I'm gonna wrap. Royce, did you have anything to say before I wrap?
Come on, Royce.
I do, because like I've been here with this. Like, also I feel like we have to talk to white folks and I think anyone on the power end of issue, because it does shift. Like as somebody mentioned earlier, the beautiful palette of New Mexico. There are folks here who are more darkly melanated than Hakim, but who their roots in Africa are literally 15,000 years ago. So, or 10, 20,000. Anyway, way the fuck back there. Like, so yeah, I feel like we have a number of ways to approach this, but talking specifically to white people or anybody on the power end of a racial dynamic, that what I hear today and what I'm struggling with is it starts with relationship, and I have to cultivate those relationships because I can go through my life and talk to nothing but white people. Yeah. I have to admit privilege. That's a prerequisite for the conversation. I have to admit that even if we want to say it's different, even if we want to say I don't have the same disadvantages, right? Because when I'm poor, but my name on my resume sounds white, it's still different, right? When we realize we're being defensive, somebody mentioned that about last summer, and the white fragility conversations that were beginning to happen. The thing that I think is hardest for me is to, instead of being defensive, saying that fucking hurt, and to sit with that, because that vulnerability is not something that we prize as a nation. We perceive vulnerability as weakness.
Yeah, great point, right?
And I think those are like core to what, if we want to be responsible white people, it's not about fucking celebrating February. It's about holding those things at the center And I'm realizing today, hearing what this conversation about reparations, I'm reminded I haven't called and threatened my senators and Congress people lately that if they don't vote for reparations, I'm kicking their asses out, because it's and from an economic standpoint, you dumb motherfuckers, it's expensive. Just pay it now. Like, why do we keep kicking this can down the road? Like, pay the bill.
To accept,
and it's not going to do anything but fuel the economy anyway.
Right.
There you go.
That's what they want. Like,
come on, where are we going to spend that money? Like, come
Target.
on. Yeah.
No, sorry. Albuquerque has 9 Walmarts. Walmart.
I mean, and this is the thing, like, this leads me to the last point, speaking community or power end of racism communities, is we have a huge amount to gain by ending these systems. A huge amount. Like,
a lot more to gain.
God, how many of us as white people feel like we are fucking crabs in the bucket with the rest of, with everybody else, right? And we're all scrambling to get out of the fucking bucket when the real problem is that there's a bucket and we're all stuck in there. Like, that's the problem. So, like, we got a lot to gain, man. Get on board.
Get on board.
And
Get me out that
we will
bucket.
be having this discussion again.
Yes,
It
kick
will
the
be
bucket.
happening again.
Damn bucket. Let's just blow up the bucket.
Fuck the bucket. That's the.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight at Where's Your Heart. Remember, subscribe, like, share, and hit that notification bell. And we will see you again next day.